Welcome once again. I'm Clifford Bates, and we're today doing the next section in our reading Sun Tzu's Art of War. This is Empty and Full, which is, I'll get it right here. I think it is the fifth section. Yes, it is not. Let's see, one, two, no, six. Oops. I'm forgetting. This is what happens. Sometimes you lose track of things. Today's topic is empty and full. It is the sixth out of 13. We're not near the halfway point. We're going to be close to the halfway point in our next chapter, our next thing we do. But it's again, this is the theme here is empty and full. Um, um, the text is again. I'm reminding you, we're using the John Mumford translation, available by Penguin. This is the ideas. This is the little cheaper one on the idea series, um, part of the Great Ideas thing, which it has the white cover. Again, both these are seen in the icons, right? And this is the European edition that's in there. There's even a bigger one that has the commentary in this one, um, but this is the Penguin edition that has the thin cover. The, the, the one's a little bigger than the other one, but that's neither here nor there. So let's get to it. Let's look at the text. Starts off again with the famous introduction. Now he says it's reported that Master Sun said, "Now what? First on the battlefield waits for the enemy fresh." So Mister, what is it? Nathan Bedford Forrest had his thing get there first with the mostest, right? Well, get there first. The first on the battlefield can await the enemy fresh. The last on the battlefield charges into the fray exhausted. So being first matters in a sense, because you're marching your troops in. You have no time to rest. They're going to go in there and be already tired from the march. You get there first. You can rest. You can prepare. You define the battlefield. Um, Now he says the skillful warrior stirs and not is not stirred. He stirs. In other words, he causes others to act. He is not caused to act by them. He lures the enemy into coming or obstructs him from coming. In other words, he either lures them or prevents them, obstructs them. In other words, he defines where they will come and how they will come. I remember the opening thing from all the way from chapter one: to lure with bait and to strike with chaos. Right? Um, Exhaust a fresh enemy, starve a well-fed enemy, and unsettle a settled enemy. So this comes this is a very this thing this structure here. It's the third the third what we call it, starting out a paragraph of the thing. Okay, not really paragraph, but it looks like it starts the stanza, and this is divided into one little top thing with three, then four, then with a series of three couplets. In other words, not really. He starts with one, stare and is not stared, right? Then he lures into coming or obstructs from coming. Then he exhausts the fresh, and then the three, right? It's a one this and that again. This is like this and this and this and this, this. So he exhausts the fresh enemy, starves a well-fed enemy, and he unsettles a settled enemy. By settle means that they're ordered, they're organized, they're competent. He unsettles them, makes it means uncompetent. They become they're not the word settle in the translation here is someone who is like, okay, calm and relaxed and a little bit confident. But that's where unsettled is someone who's not so calm, not so relaxed, not so confident. So you want to make one into the other. The next point he goes in here: appear at the place to which he must hasten, and hasten to the place where he least expects you. Okay, in other words, you need to appear where he must run to get you. And so appear at a place where he must come get you. And you should go to the place where he least expects you. Next line: march 100 miles without tiring by traveling where no enemy is. In other words, you should go to a place where the enemy is nowhere, not there. And he says, what? To be sure of victory by attacking the undefended. So anything that's not defended, you attack the undefended. This allows you victory. If there's not being defended, you can attack it and it's yours. To be sure of defense by defending the unattacked. In other words, make sure you're always defending. This is even hilarious. This is kind of metaphysical, but he's saying this. Be sure of defense by defending those areas that are not being attacked. That sounds really odd in that sense, right? The skillful warrior attacks so the enemy cannot defend. He defends so that the enemy cannot attack. Okay, this is very interesting. In other words, a skillful warrior attacks. Well, he attacks so the enemy cannot defend it. So you attack areas where the enemy can't defend it, and you defend areas that the enemy can't attack. You defend so you defend your things so the enemy has no occasion to attack you. And this is the interesting one. Oh, subtlety of subtleties, without form. Oh, mysteries of mysteries, without sound. He is master of his enemy's fate. Now, all of a sudden, all subtleties of subtleties. Someone who can be the general leader who can make subtleties and deal with the subtleties of the things we talked about before. About the two twos in the previous chapter. The, the direct and indirect. The momentum and timing. Right. If other words, and the organization so that it appears so something that looks organized versus disunited and disorganized. Things that look like things that look chaotic, but which are in fact orderly and unified. Things that look chaotic, which are not only ordered. Things that look tired and exhausted that are not. Things that look weak but are really strong. Okay, this is the subtleties of subtleties. Without form. In other words, the units are such that they don't have a clear form, so they look broken, but they're not. Oh, mysteries and mysteries without sound. Where he says that he is the master of his enemy's fate. Now he says what? Now this is interesting. He advances irresistibly, attacking emptiness. Whoa, attacking emptiness. Okay, why? Because you pick the areas where he's not defending. You get an area where you get the most easiest position to secure positions to allow you to attack other areas that he's not defending. And then what is he doing? He has to, and if you go towards things that are important to him, he must come out. This is like a classic strategy. This is the kind of strategy where you kind of force him to come after you. Force him to come after you, in a sense. This is what, in many ways, this is what, at the end near the end of the Civil War in the winter of '65, which is really January '65, the Army of Tennessee of the Confederates, the Army of Alabama and Tennessee, the Western District, under the General, Texas General, I forget Hood, I think it is Hood. They make a very they're trying to stop Sherman's march. Okay, Sherman is marching after capturing Atlanta, and helps get President Lincoln reelected. Sherman decides that to burn Atlanta and march through Georgia to Savannah on the coast, cutting Georgia and the South in half, right, and move upwards. Um, what the Instead of attacking, what Hood thought he would do is move up to Tennessee and capture, go right into the heart of Nashville, and capture Nashville and recapture the South and move north and force Sherman to come fight him, right? But the problem was with this decision was that it was a bad decision because there was another army in the Tennessee controlled by Halleck, the enemy of Sherman. And what happened was that Sherman said, "Okay, Halleck can deal with it. I don't have to rescue him. He has a big army. I don't need to go do it. I'll just keep paying it." In other words, there was an army there. Therefore, the move up there, the goal was to what? Move him this way. Didn't do that because there was no risk, because there was a force already that he could contend with him, and it did contend with him. It destroyed him in the two battles right up to the Battle of Nashville, and crushed him. And at Nashville, totally destroyed the Confederate Army. It broke completely. So this is what I mean. This is the problem. You must be able to know the enemy's situation, and you're going to try to move him to come towards you. Therefore, the mistake was going towards Nashville. If someone went instead of to Nashville, but aimed over, following the Mississippi up, going to Chicago, and that would have caused chaos. That would have forced both not only Halleck but also Sherman to abandon and go to him. Okay, again, this is what Sun Tzu is saying, that going to Nashville was thinking of it but not really thinking of it. He should have known that there was forces there, and and those forces could defend. In fact, they were uphill, and they were stupid. You picked the worst battlefields. The Confederate, the Battle of Franklin was a charge uphill. I mean, this was a disaster, and Nashville was equally uphill. In other words, the attackers were completely ridiculous. Again, not listening. I mean, whoever did the Hood was completely incompetent, a general in a sense, because who knows if he read Sun Tzu, but he's violating everything Sun Tzu is warning that you should do here. So what do? A general does what? He he attacks. No, he advances irresistibly. He attacks emptiness. He retreats, eluding pursuit. In other words, if he's going to retreat, he does so that he's not going to be pursued. Too swift to be overtaken. So therefore, he's retreating, he's going to be he's going to be not be able to be pursued. In other words, eluding effective pursuit, and then he's swift, too swift to be overtaken. Now this something interesting. He says, he goes, the next stanza up here. If I wish to engage, then the enemy, for all his high ramparts and deep moats, cannot avoid the engagement. I attack that which he is obliged to rescue. In other words, if his defenses are perfect, he has high ramparts, deep moats, and things. You're not going to attack that. You're going to attack something that the enemy, must rescue. Something that is so valuable to him that if he doesn't rescue it, it will the pressure, the political and other pressure would be on him it'd be unthinkable. In other words, you attack, you oblige to rescue. You attack which the enemy is obliged, he must rescue. I do not wish to engage I do not wish to engage. If I don't want to engage my enemy, he says here, the next project, I can hold my ground with nothing more than a line drawn around it. The enemy cannot engage me. In combat, I distract him in different directions. In other words, I have you mix these things. I just draw a line like this over here. I'm over here. Draw a line over here, and what I do is I do everything around other places where he. I don't want to. I'm not going to go and engage him directly. I'm not going to go make a war. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send my attack forces to harass outlying things, which then forces his reaction. This is I just draw a line with nothing more than a line drawn around my ground. This is even more interesting because it's going to be the enemy cannot engage me in combat. Why? Because I distract him with in a different direction. I do something over here and over here and over here and over here. I have something being done over there, there, there. I'm over here, but all of a sudden, bam, 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 loud noises and things being attacked, things moving this way. His form is visible, but I am formless. Okay, this is the idea. The art of being formless. This is the thing, having your armies not appear to be as organized. In other words, this is chaos, the concept of chaos and formlessness. This is something he kind of emphasizes. How am I doing this? Again, his form is visible, but I am formless. Right? I am concentrated. He is divided. Now, this is interesting. You're formless, but you're concentrated. Think of the rate again. This is why he uses the metamor momentum of of the avalanche coming down, or the water flood of the broke dam that's releasing glass of water, or the in other words, of the previous chapters, sections. He says, they, by being so organized as they are, they're divided in that sense. They're not as unified and like this. He goes, I am concentrated into one. He is divided into 10. I am 10 to his one, many against his few. So he's divided. He has to defend himself. I'm not going to defend myself the same way. I'm going to be what concentrate. I'm going to have my forces together. So every time I can attack him, he's going to be outnumbered in this sense. And and I think this is the danger of warfare in that sense. This is the thing. And he goes, so to his one, many against his, in other words, I am 10 to his one, many against his few. He goes, next thought, right? Attack few with many, and my opponent will be weak. So again, idea of when you attack, you're attacking with, you're outnumbering the enemy. You're attacking with a kind of a supremacy of force. Attacking with, in a situation where you have outnumber your enemy. This is the famous line. There's a famous story about Montgomery. They named the martini, a dry martini after him. Hemingway made a martini, and that was, typical martinis 4-1, 5-1 vermouth, right? Maybe 10% vermouth, 1-10. Well, Montgomery had his thing about 15-1 ratio. He wanted to outnumber the Alamine. He wanted to outnumber the Ramo 15-1, and therefore therefore the Montgomery was a very dry martini for every, 15 parts vodka, gin to 1 part vermouth. This is the overwhelming power of the kind of odds that Montgomery wanted. So what is he doing? He says, I will divide. And he says, attack few with many, and my opponent will be weak. Next, the place I intend to attack must not be known. If it is unknown, the enemy will have to reinforce many places. In other words, they don't know where I'm going to attack. And then he says, the enemy will reinforce many places, but I shall attack few. So therefore, I need to deceive the enemy when I'm going to attack. So they have to defend a lot. But I can't let them know I'm going to attack. If they know where I'm going to attack, they can move the forces to defend where I'm going. Therefore, that's the point Sun Tzu makes, that you must be able to not allow them to know, but misdirect them to believe that there's going to be other cases and therefore they have to defend over the area. Therefore, you're going to concentrate your force on the one place, and therefore, um, 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 now, and you will be successful about numbering him because he's being divided because he needs to protect what he thinks you're going to attack, and then you attack the area where he's the weakest in that sense. By now, this thing is a series of 5 stanzas, right next full stanzas, right after each other, right? By reinforcing his vanguard, he weakens his rear. So the vanguard is the outlight area. If he reinforces that, his rear is weakened. By reinforcing his rear, he weakens his vanguard. By reinforcing his flank, he weakens his right flank. He weakens his left. By reinforcing his left, he weakens his right. By reinforcing every part, he weakens every part. In other words, this sounds wait a minute. It's reinforcing every how. In other words, if you reinforce everything, everything becomes weak. In other words, the vanguard and the rear. Vanguard is that which is facing the enemy, and the rear is the back behind, right? You if you reinforce from the you put your things in the vanguard, you're going to take forces out of here, weaken this, and if you're going to put forces back in to defend the rear areas, you're going to remove from the vanguard. And the right flank, it's going to hurt the left flank. The left flank, it's going to hurt the right. You know, right flank, left flank, so behind. Left flank, right flank, so behind. So therefore, this idea of forcing the enemy to constantly weaken himself in certain areas to allow this. Now he says, weakness stems from preparing an attack against attack. Weakness stems from preparing against attack. This is very interesting. If you have to prepare against an attack, this is an aspect of this is how weakness arises. You have to prepare. Strength comes from obliging the enemy to prepare against an attack. In other words, you have to threaten, you have to signal and threaten you're going to attack a lot of areas and force them to defend areas. They having to defend them, that's weakness. You're obliging them to defend them, that's strength. If we know the place and day of the battle, then we can engage, and even after a march of 100 miles. Now, we know these things. And we have to know the place and the location, right, of the battle. Then we can engage even after a long march of 100 miles. Okay? In other words, but if neither day nor place is known, the left cannot help the right cannot help the left, the vanguard cannot help the rear, nor the rear can help the vanguard. It is still worse if the troops are separated by dozens of miles or even a mile or two. So in other words, he's saying what? If you don't know the place, in other words, if you're not thinking in terms of where you're planning to have the battle, what day, when, all these factors must be in your head and you know it. And that therefore your actions must reflect the plan. And the enemy must not know it. It must be to a degree that you created the obstacle situations, you picked the situation. First, you pick where you want to go. What is the ways to go? And that gives you advantage, gives you strategic and a tactical advantage, both tactical and strategic. But basically, you want strategic because why? You want to get them in a situation where they're forced to go something. The famous line from Teddy Roosevelt: grab them by the balls, their hearts and minds will follow. Right. This is what he's saying. You go for an area, and remember he says you attack the undefended. You go to an area where you know he's not going to be able that he's not defending. You go there, you take it, and you look for another occasion. Keep on looking for the best locations. So what is the real goal here? The real goal may be some position here you know he has to defend. So you take areas to get you there. And then what you do is you make sure, in other words, you keep to your plan, not to the degree that if it is no longer viable because all of a sudden he's done something that it's no longer feasible to do, you might have to give it up. But then you should have alternatives. If that doesn't, is there another way you can do something else that you can, that he will, are you now at the place you are now? Does this create occasions where there is a better, even optimal location that forces him to come after you, that you, once you're there, you have the advantage and you can destroy it? Again, therefore, if you don't know where the place and the day of the thing, in other words, these things, he says, this, the left, all the forces of the battlefield. He says, this is the force of the battlefield: the front, the rear, the left flank, right flank. These have to be this. In other words, and also, therefore, they can't help. So reinforces, you remember what he said earlier about reinforcement weakening things? Well, if you're reinforcing, it means it's not the battlefield of helping and negotiating. In the battlefield, these things are not reinforcing for the purpose of, you're not reinforcing things for the purpose of assisting the battle for the action, but rather defending. Okay, you're defending, so you're preparing, like, so that they're gonna, oh, you're gonna attack from the rear, he's gonna attack from the side. In other words, these things are what the thing is. And he's saying, if you're not prepared, you can handle these. If you're prepared, you know what they're going to do. Your troops can what? They they can even march a long time. They'll get it. But if you don't know these kind of things, what's going to happen? Nobody can help each other. No one going to help each other. And what happens is, and the troops are separated by a dozen miles or even by a mile or two. In other words, they'll still war, so the troops being further away, not knowing what to do, what's going on. According to my assessment, this is the next segment. According to my assessment, the troops of you are many, but that will avail them little in the day of struggle. So I say victory is still possible. The enemy is many, okay, but that won't help him, because on the day of victory that won't matter, because why? I'm going to do such thing. They're going to divide up, and then I will attack them at the weakest while I'm outnumbering them. And then I will attack in such a way, again, that I will take something that everything else will have to come to. But by this time, I took out, and I have the better position. I'll take a strategic position that gives me the supreme tactical advantage, where it's, in other words, the ground is such that I'm able to, him marching into it, even if he had advantage, he won't have the numbers. The land itself, at a high rate, with a high momentum. In other words, a defender is going to be able to repulse even a larger force in that sense. So he says, and he goes like this: the enemy may be many, but we can prevent an engagement. In other words, this is what he says: the enemy may be many, but we can prevent an engagement. Scrutinize him, know the flaws in his plan. So, okay, we can prevent an engagement. How you do this? Scrutinize him so that you know the flaws of what is his plan, and know the weaknesses of his plan. What is the problems of the plan or his goal? Rouse him, discover the springs of his action. You want to know how effective, rouse him, make him to act, so you can see the springs of his action. In other words, how does he move? What is the effectiveness of it? How does it work? Make his form visible. Discover his grounds of life and death. In other words, make his form visible and see what is the forms of the ground, which are for him life, and which ones the grounds are death. Probe. So therefore, again, this is a theme back here. What the enemy you can do this by engagement. Then scrutinize him, rouse him, make his form visible, probe him. These are four, right? Probe him, know his strength and know his weakness. This is scrutinize him, know what his plans are, and know the flaw of his plans. Scrutinize him, know his flaw of his plans. So you have to know his plans, and you have to know the flaws of them. Then what? You have to rouse him, discover how is his operation work. Then you do what? You make his form visible. Find a way to make his form visible to you. So discover his grounds of life and death. In other words, those, the ways that lands or things that are the ground that he would take the stand on will be beneficial to him, and those that would be detrimental to him. Probe him to know his strengths and his weaknesses. Those are the weaknesses of his force. You send things in to see his how strong or weak he is. So, again, this is the way you learn. No, the highest skill is forming dispositions. Is in forming dispositions. The highest skill in forming dispositions is to be without form. In other words, it is to be without form. Formlessness is proof against the prying and the subtlest spy and the machinations of the wisest brain. In other words, if you have no clear form, it's very difficult for them to figure your plan. They figure out your things. They can't pry and look into you. The spies can't look at you and pry, okay. And then you can't, in other words, and the wisest brain cannot figure what you're doing. So if you're formless, this is great. That's why you have to organize to be formless. Not to be real, not to be formless, but to appear formless, to give the manifestation of formlessness. And this is why if the enemy is doing this also, you have to figure out that's why you need to do these other things. You need to do what? You need to scrutinize, rouse him so that what happens? You see he will act, and by his actions you'll see what works. Vice versa. He's a good leader will do this to you, so you need to know maybe I don't react. Maybe I don't do this. Maybe I don't respond. Maybe I don't do this. If I can afford it, I'll let some retaliation, but maybe not, Again, make form visible. Don't make yourself visible in that sense. Probe him to strengthen weaknesses. And maybe you want to, if you're weak, you should perhaps have your soldier, if you don't have an area that's weak, have your soldiers over respond in a certain way. Appear stronger. The highest skill in forming disposition is to be without form, formlessness. As I said, this is that line. Proof against prying of the subtlest spy and the machinations of the wisest brain. Next thing, exploit the enemy's disposition to attain victory. This is the common man. This the common man cannot know. He understands the forms, the dispositions, but my victory, colon, but not how I created the forms of victory. In other words, the common man can figure out through forms and dispositions of my victory, but not of how I created the forms. So therefore, they exploit the enemy's dispositions to obtain victory. The common man, most people won't know how to do this because why? You need to understand. He can understand. People understand forms and dispositions, but his victory is what being able to discern the formless and to become formless and to present formlessness. Victorious campaigns are unrepeatable. They take form in response to the infinite varieties of circumstance. So this is very interesting. He says that there is no one pattern. In other words, there's no set pattern of victory, of a victorious campaign. Victorious campaigns are always designed on the circumstances of what the leader or the general is confronted with. And these are infinite varieties of circumstances. So and it's never going to be a repeatable, simple pattern that responds to every time. The variety of so infinite. There's not going to be if the patterns of possibilities were smaller. In other words, if the scope of patterns are smaller, then what will happen? It'd be universal. Certain patterns that will always repeat themselves with the certain smallness of size. But because of the inexhaustible levels of he's saying of the infinite varieties of circumstance, what happens here is that you cannot have a general idea about this, a general strategy that can be repeated over and over again. Next stanza. Military disposition takes the form like water. Water shuns the high and hastens to the low. War shuns the strong and attacks the weak. Okay, in other words, military position is like water. Water doesn't like high; it goes low. It doesn't float in the air; it just goes low, right? And what war shuns the strong and prefers the weak. Water takes its current from the lay of the land. In other words, the current of the water, the way the water flows, reflects the land. The warrior shapes his victory from the dynamics of the enemy. So the enemy's dynamic. What is the enemy's dynamic? The enemy's is the enemy has a dynamic regarding his all the forces at the question. In other words, the rulers, the generals, and the soldiers, and the land they're in, and the way they're defending. He goes here. War has no constant dynamic. Water has no constant form. So He's comparing water and war. Water and war. Water has no constant form. Water can be in a glass, a bottle. It can river, ocean, river. It can be. Its form is very infinitely. War has no constant dynamic. But you need what is it? The dynamic of the enemy. If you understand the enemy's dynamic, this is how the warrior shapes his victory. Supreme military skills is deriving victory from the changing circumstances of the enemy. Okay, this is the point. The enemy circumstances, they're going to vary at moments of different points of time and different occasions and different situations. And then you need to do what? You need to take advantage. When they're weak, remember what he said. Things to do. If they're proud, all those things he said to do earlier in the chapters. Those things you stir an enemy, make him proud if he's kind of weak. In other words, you try to shape their behavior, their reaction. You need to base and then lure, create images so that this looks defenseless, or it's not. It's a trap. Okay, and he goes again. This is deriving victory from the changing circumstance enemy. Now here is the thing. Among the five elements, there is no one that remains constant. Remember the five elements. That goes all the way back. What are the five elements? I always. I think it's the five fundamentals. Oh God, I don't think he has. He has not. I don't remember him saying what is the five elements. Um, the skill. 1, 2, 3. There's that list of 5 steps. There's lots of fives. Um, well, among the five there elements, the elements that create the universe, he says there's no one in constant supremacy. In other words, the five elements within the nature. What is was it? I thought there's four. Isn't it 4 elements? Is a fifth one. Time, maybe that's it. Okay, what is it? Um, I paused for a second simply to allow this. This is the. If I can. Um, no, it's in the background. Well, it's the five. The Chinese philosophy had fivefold thing it's saying here. I thought I'm showing it to you, but maybe I'm not. It's wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Those are the five fundamentals in this, and none are arguments here are superior, right? Every one of these at certain times are going to be superior over the other, um, of the five, among the five elements. But then war is interesting. War is said to be like water. Okay, war is like water, but only in terms of its dynamic. Okay, but that's here and there. So therefore, the five elements of wood, fire, um, earth, metal, and water, right? So that gives us the weird situation in a sense of understanding that these things are kind of the elements in the Chinese mentality of this. And now he goes, of four seasons have no fixation. In other words, the four seasons, well, they do have, in the sense of, this is have no fixation. In other words, the seasons are cycled like this, but they're not. There's variation of them. Sometimes when they're longer, sometimes a winter can be longer, a short summer can be shorter, a spring can be longer or shorter. In other words, it's not set perfectly. There's seasons, there's a cycle, but then there's not fixed in that sense. And then there are long days and short. The moon waxes and wanes, and it wanes. It waxes and it wanes. In other words, the sun, by waxing means there's some days where, because why? The earth goes around, and therefore some days are longer, then the sun is up longer. And then some days the moon is bright and the moon is not bright because of the way it waxes and wanes. So therefore, the seasons and patterns of things give variations. Now there is a now to be honest with you, there is some variation. There is a cycle within the seasons and within the day, that over time certain days are going to be longer than others. You know that it's set by this rotation of the Earth in relation to the Sun, and likewise the moon cycle will vote with the moon's rotation with the Earth. So therefore, we are hit with a certain aspect of understanding how he ends this. In other words, you have to know the circumstances of the enemy, and therefore you have to take in consideration that one is the elements, and remember all the elements. This idea, understanding of infinite circumstances. So once you understand the circumstances of the enemy, the specific circumstances of the enemy, and the specific conditions, you're able to respond to it and understand it. Okay, now this is the end of this for now. Right now, um, again, if you have any comments, please put them below. If you liked it, like it, share it with a friend. If you want to get more of this, please subscribe and recommend it to a friend again. If you like something, please share this on social media. Please, this is the way we grow, because YouTube is not going to grow this myself. Um, and again, I'll see you next time when we go on the next chapter. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.